Right, welcome everybody. Sorry we're slightly late in getting started. The technology is now working, and we hope it's going to work for the next 86 minutes that we have for this meeting. So I'm Tim Loughton, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for 1001 days, and we have a positive cornucopia of talent and presentations this afternoon, and we've got a lot to get through. So if I just quickly go through the running order, obviously it's been a little while since we last met. There's been a lot going on in the Best Start in Life field, and so we have got 6 speakers from various organisations this afternoon to update us and give us their role in all of this. We're going to start with Sarah McMullen from the Royal Foundation. I'm delighted to be here with us today. Then we have Andrea, who I don't need to introduce, who is a regular and will give us an up-to-date account of where we are on Best Start in Life. We've got Miranda, who's slightly upshot at the moment, but we will turn the camera around, who's Head of Early Years and Prevention at the Anna Freud Centre. Then we've got Wook, who is the Head of Development at the Parent Infant Foundation, who's our Secretariat. We have Alison, Morton, another old favourite. Well, I shouldn't say old favourite, a firm favourite, rather, very experienced favourite from the Institute of Health visiting. And from UNICEF, the UK Baby and Toddler Guarantee, going to talk about, we have Claire O'Neill. So they are all very welcome. Now, the trouble is, we've allocated 10 minutes each, so I'm going to have to be quite ruthless on timing. And the idea is that we have all of the presentations, and then hopefully we'll still have time for questions and discussion at the end. Now, the disadvantage we have is, I can see there's well over 100 people online. I'm hoping everybody is hearing and seeing us okay. If you're not, then I'm not quite sure what we do, but we're going to carry on as if you are. And if anybody's got my phone number and they're not receiving all this, they might give me a ring. But I think we're working okay, because there'll be people there to tell us if not. So on that basis, we are slightly dark. I might try and bring the shutters down because of the light behind us. Great, thanks, Andrea. But let me first go to Sarah McMullen, who's Associate Director of Research and Policy at the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood, who's going to talk about the Shaping Us campaign, which has been a lot in the media recently. Okay, Sarah, I think go for it, and I think it's all working. Are we happy, Ben?
Yeah.
We are broadcasting.
We are.
Even though we can't see anybody on the screen.
No, there's people there. Sorry. It's popped up with everything else.
Okay.
So I'll say a big thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to tell everyone a little bit about the work of the Centre for Early Childhood and our Shaping Us campaign, which launched just last month. So my slides are going to appear shortly. Just give that a second.
There's one.
Yeah, they can. See. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. There we go.
Great.
It's too light behind us.
Thank you so much, Ben. So I'm just going to start by introducing the Centre for Early Childhood for those of you who might not be familiar with us. So we were launched in 2021 by the Princess of Wales to drive awareness of and action on the extraordinary impact of early childhood. And then
Yeah, thank you.
so we went through 2 interconnected aims. The first is creating campaigns to raise awareness and inspire action. And the second is around researching and collaborating to drive the actions and solutions that create positive change.
Sorry.
We are supported by an expert advisory group, many names who will hopefully be familiar to people listening in today, and they bring a wealth of expertise across perinatal psychiatry, service development, policy, neuroscience, for example, and they're providing strategic advice and oversight to our work. Now at launch, we released the Big Change Starts Small report, which brought together decades of science and research on early childhood and why it matters. And this really is providing a blueprint for the work of the centre while we stay up to date with new and emerging research. And that report made 6 areas of recommendation, one of which was around raising awareness, really recognising the need to raise societal understanding of early childhood and why it matters so much, and also changing the way people think about early childhood to drive a more holistic approach with a focus on social and emotional development and the well-being of carers at its heart. Thank you. And so that is the starting founding priority objective for us as a centre, and that's why we were so delighted last month to launch Shaping Us, our campaign to raise awareness of the extraordinary impact of early childhood. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what went into the campaign and our learning so far. Thanks, Ben. So the campaign is heavily informed by the research we've done over the last year. We conducted what is the first of what will be an annual public perceptions tracking survey last year. And we found that 9 in 10 people recognise the importance of early childhood in shaping later life, but actually only less than 1 in 5 recognise the specific importance of the period from pregnancy through to age 5. There was widespread support for a greater societal focus on early childhood, with over 70% of the public agreeing with this. And we found that mental health and creating a happier society were the most appealing reasons for the public for focusing on this period. And on the next slide, you'll see that every child having a fair opportunity to realise their potential was also appealing. In these areas, we found cut across different audiences. So for anyone that's interested, you can find the detailed research report on our website. It was released during the campaign launch week. And there's lots of insight in that on understanding and awareness, motivations, support and capabilities, etc., by audience, which has helped inform our work. Some of the more detailed analysis we did showed that 1 in 3 adults reported knowing just a little or nothing about how children develop in their early childhood. And even amongst parents, this was 1 in 5 saying they knew a little or nothing. And we dug into this in a little bit more detail and some qualitative research, and found particularly for social and emotional development, it just wasn't front of mind. Parents were tending to think of physical and cognitive milestones. And they found social and emotional development really hard to articulate, and they found it hard to describe. They often had negative connotations as well as positive with some of the concepts like around attachment or resilience. And it didn't feel like it was something that was tangible and within their sphere of control. And so for campaign launch, thank you, Ben, we really wanted to focus on bringing the science to life, on helping people understand that the brain is developing at an incredible rate during early childhood, and that our interactions and the people around us and our surroundings are really shaping who we become during this really important period. And we also really wanted to help people understand that there's a collective responsibility, that we all have a vested interest in this, and that we can all play a role in creating change. So at the heart of the campaign, there was a short 90-second claymation film, which tells the story of Layla from pregnancy through to birth. And we really brought together the scientific expertise and creative minds to try and make as engaging and accessible short film as possible. And you'll see when you watch the film, the colours in the brain responding and reacting to the noises and sounds and interactions around Layla. Now, IT permitting, we're going to try and watch it together, I think. Thank you, Alison.
We're only getting it's been told.
We'll start at the end.
Go back a slide.
Can we get it?
Yeah.
Don't worry, Ben, if it's going to take time, just like this. I understand this.
Yeah.
What do you think? No, okay. Why don't you carry on and then we can come back to the film
Yeah.
if we go to it.
I think it's moved on there.
Okay.
No, okay.
Nobody.
Let's come say hi together.
Thank you, Ben. So the film can be found on the Shaking Hills website, and you'll also find there a series of explainer videos that you can see here, where Aileen McCrory, professor at UCL, explains the key concepts that are covered in the film. So please do go and have a look around the website and see what resources that might be useful to you in your work. Now, we got really good reach and engagement around the film through our social media challenges, but also through the extensive media coverage that happened around the various events that happened across the week. The film was shown on Piccadilly Lights, you can see, on launch day. It was also shown in cinemas across the UK throughout February, and stills and images from the next slide then, and was shown on out-of-home advertising across the UK as well. Now, it was really important to us that we reached a very wide and varied audience in the campaign. We really wanted to get the message out to the whole of society. This isn't a campaign targeting parents or the sector, but really everybody, about the vital importance of early childhood and why it matters so much. And we're really fortunate to have a fantastic group of champions who are working with us from the world of media and sports and music, and who reach a really varied and significant audience between them. And they're really committed to the topic. A lot of them have done excellent public engagement work around mental health in the past already, for example, and are with us for the long term. And we also visited Leeds during launch week, and there the Princess of Wales met with members of the public at Kirkgate Market during the morning, and then visited students on a childhood studies programme at the University of Leeds in the afternoon. And I had the great privilege of joining the teaching session with those students in the morning, where they actually used the film as a teaching aid. So it really helped them think about the theories of child development that they've been learning and apply it to what they were seeing in the film, because they sort of had a family to observe in the room with them. And it's really great to see that in practice. We really welcome any feedback and suggestions about how we can build out those actions for using in different ways. So a little bit to finish on campaign evaluation. So it's really, really important to us. This is just a launch. There's lots more to come. The campaign was informed by lots of research and campaign development and testing, but we're also doing an evaluation. We've got pre and post-campaign surveys. The post-campaign surveys are out in the field at the moment, so we're gathering all of that public data. And this will really help us understand the reach and resonance and impact of the campaign, but most importantly to us at this stage is gathering all of the learning. How did this land? How did it resonate? What did it get people thinking about? What action were people motivated to do off the back of this? And all of this across different audiences will be able to pull in to inform the next stage of our campaign. I just wanted to finish by saying a big thank you, because I know lots of people who are dialed into this today will have been involved in the campaign and in the centre of the campaign over time, and also helped with support. And we really recognise what an enormous amount of incredible best practice and innovation is already happening out there, and really hope that we can be part of sort of shining a spotlight on all of that great work to inspire more change and action in the future. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great, Sarah, thanks very much. I love the video. Thank you also for keeping you 10 minutes as well, despite the technology hiccups. I just realised I said we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. Well, of course, this is a hybrid meeting, so if you've got questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try and pick up on some of those when we've done all the presentations. I'm sure it's going to work somehow. Anyway, let's go on to the second speaker, Andrea Leadsom, who doesn't need any introduction, but going to give us an update on where we are on the Best Start in Life campaign.
Thanks, Tim. And that was brilliant, Sarah. And it's just fantastic. It really feels as though the time for the Best Start for Life is definitely here. And I just pay tribute to all the work of the Royal Foundation, because highlighting the issue and actually shedding a light on how complicated this is for families is so important. You know, I think for politicians, still lots of them say, oh, we can't interfere with families, you know, that's private business, not for politicians to get involved with. But the reality is that for so many families, they're like, oh, this baby, what do I do with it? So, you know, that's where we're doing the so what almost. You're highlighting the issue brilliantly. And the Best Start for Life, I think, is so what? So what are we doing about it? So just very quick recap. March 2021, we launched the vision for the 1001 critical days, the Best Start for Life. And so that's almost 2 years ago, almost to the day. To start with, we were planning to roll it out across England with family hubs, that in those family hubs would have joined up Start for Life services for every single expecting parent. And those universal services would include midwifery, health visiting, mental health support, infant feeding support, disability support, and safeguarding. And those would be the universal services. And in addition to those, different local authorities would look at the extra services that they would like to offer, things such as smoking cessation, debt advice, perhaps substance misuse reduction schemes, etc. So that's the vision. And during the last 2 years, there's been a huge amount of progress made, but very specifically in October 21, we were awarded £500 million from the Treasury to roll out the Best Start for Life. 200 million for the Supporting Families programme to try and help the very earliest years, and 300 million to roll out the Family Hubs and Start for Life programme. So during the 18 months since then, the Start for Life unit that sits in DHSC, the health department, has selected 75 upper tier local authority areas. That's roughly 1 in 2. There's 152 in England in total. 75 of them are receiving funding from that 300 million to roll out the Family Hubs and Start for Life programme in their area. They were chosen according to deprivation indices, but also according to a good split of rural and urban, so that we didn't just end up with one concentration in particular areas. And as you can see from the progress update that we launched a couple of weeks ago, there's a really good spread of where those 75 funded areas are. But I do want to pay tribute to the 77 who haven't got additional funding, who are doing it anyway. And there are some great examples of good practice in areas that are just using their own existing funding to roll out the Best Start for Life. So where we're at right now, coming right up to date, is that 2 weeks ago we announced who the 75 local authority areas are that are getting funded. Each of those 75 areas has created their own rollout plan. So their plan for delivering within their family hub network joined up services for every single family. And what they will be doing is providing a Start for Life offer. So congratulations, you're expecting a baby. Here's your Start for Life offer. Here's where you access those services. This is the address of the family hub. Here's the phone number for the health visitors, the midwifery team. You can, in some cases, have your baby's birth registered here. You can come for a drop-in. You can come and talk to a health visitor. You can have a parenting programme. You can talk about yours or your partner's mental health issues. You can get infant feeding support, in some cases also childcare advice. So that's the Start for Life offer that every family expecting a baby will receive going forward. That's the starting point for the rollout of the Start for Life. And the Family Hub networks in every local authority area will be both physical places, a welcoming hub that you can go to, you can drop into whenever you want to, when it's open. It'll also be a virtual place, because in COVID lockdown, lots of parents said, well, we want to go back to face-to-face, but actually the convenience of joining a parenting class on Teams or on Zoom when you can get the technology to work then, is very convenient. Or if, you know, the baby's just pooed and you really are going to miss the bus because you're trying to change the baby. So actually trying to facilitate support for families both virtually and physically, and of course, very important, outreach in their own homes, in local community settings and so on. So that's how the family hubs will deliver. There will be a Start for Life offer. There will be those 6 universal services plus other universal plus services. And then at the moment, we're at the point where those 75 have got their first, in some cases, second phase of funding, and they are now rolling it out. And very specifically, there are 3 funded services, which are infant feeding, parent and infant relationship support, and also parenting programs and parenting classes. And so each local authority area that has funding has the money to now go and roll those out. And different local authority areas are at different stages of progress with that. But that's to bring it right up to date. Also, in that announcement 2 weeks ago, made in Cornwall with the Prime Minister, and it was brilliant to be sitting on the floor in this lovely little family hub with him, his wife, and a whole bunch of babies. I mean, he said to me, he turned to me and he said, "This is the happiest thing I've done since I've been Prime Minister." And you could see in his face that that was indeed the case. So it was an absolutely lovely thing to do. And I believe that he is utterly committed to this. And I have to say, I think cross-party, there's huge commitment to this too. I think there's a lot of support from every single political party to rolling this out and making this a success of it. So now, in addition to the rollout, we are doing various things from the centre. So the Start for Life unit consists of 40 civil servants who sit in the Department for Health, and me and my parliamentary team, and loads of goodwill and supporters who get involved, other parliamentarians. And so some of the things that we're doing from the centre, I'll just read them out. We are commissioning training programs to upskill early years practitioners to help them to deliver evidence-based interventions that will support parent-infant relationships. And there'll be much more about that very soon. Those are being commissioned now. There will be a public health campaign where I know the Start for Life unit are talking to the Royal Foundation to make sure that we're sort of in lockstep and not sort of doing something completely vastly different. We will be establishing a national centre for supervision for parent-infant relationship interventions, because supervision has been something that's been raised time and again, is that is something that's often lacking, so the practitioners themselves aren't getting enough support. We'll be developing a series of prompts to help all early years practitioners to be able to ask the right questions of families as to how they're feeling, how they feel about themselves, their babies, their relationships, and so on. We'll also be developing, we are developing an e-learning package to help early years practitioners and volunteers, so whether they're paid or unpaid, to help people to understand the links between breastfeeding and perinatal mental health, which is a very specific and important link. And also e-learning packages to help develop reflective practice in all volunteers and professionals in the early years space. We're going to be supporting financially the National Breastfeeding Helpline to be open for longer hours and with greater support for families who are really struggling to get that baby latched on. And we'll also be investing about £10 million in workplace pilots in approximately 5 local authority areas to look at new and innovative ways to get what is my absolute dream, is that every family has a key contact. Now, if they are a family that needs intensive support, it needs to be a very senior and experienced health visitor. But if it's somebody who's had perhaps 4 kids already, it's all going well, they just need someone to signpost them, then it could be an early years worker, volunteer, practitioner. But that would work as a team, and that team would work closely together to make sure that the wraparound support for the families are there. So that is some of the things that we're doing at the centre. We've also now got a small team of consultants to the rollout for local authority areas, and they will be going round to the 75 who are funded and the 77 who aren't, helping them to develop and roll out their own Start for Life offers. We have funding for parent and carer panels that will provide direct feedback to the single identifiable local leader for the best Start for Life in each area. Those parent and carer panels will be getting up and running over the next few months. And then we also have a huge amount of work going on in measuring outcomes, because obviously, as everyone here will appreciate, the Treasury is not going to give us any more money unless we can prove this is working. And so actually measuring outcomes for parents' confidence, for babies, for reductions in things like dental decay in babies, in improvements in infant feeding, improvements in parental mental health, improvements in parental relationships, parental education, and so on. And also the satisfaction and feeling of being valued by early years practitioners, whether paid or volunteers. So actually helping in that whole early year space to frankly institutionalize it. You know, I always say, if I was to tell you, right, we're going to ditch your reception, we're not bothering with 4-year-olds anymore, they're not really important, you'd be like, what do you mean? But of course that is what's been happening forever with the very earliest period. Is it's been there one day, not there the next time you have a child. This service is here this week, next month it's gone, and nobody worries about that. So what we actually need to do, and what I actually think everyone on the APPG is determined to do, is to make sure that this can never go away again, that we pin this down and it becomes almost like the right of every baby to have the best start for life, to have that joined up support. That's my personal ambition. And I always say to people, if you want to get rid of me from politics, just do it, and then I'll go quietly. And if you don't, then I won't. So they just roll their eyes, you don't have some more money. So that is absolutely the plan, is to institutionalize this. And then just some of the other things we're doing, which I think are really, really transformative, is the digital red book. And that's something that NHSE is working on. That's going to come out of the electronic patient records. There will be the start of it being rolled out in April 23, which is only a month away. And so what that will do is, first of all, for some parents, depending on their access to electronic patient records, it will provide them with an electronic version of what is currently available in paper-based version. However, the ambition for the project is that ultimately it will enable you to talk to your health visitor, to your midwife, to your early years practitioner. It will be a place where there can be some safeguarding, so professionals can flag to each other if they're concerned about this baby or this parent. It will also be a place where you can record baby's first smile, first tooth, photo with granny, immunisations, all of the data that so often, particularly sadly in safeguarding issues where babies and young children turn up with no red book, so very little data about what happened there. So actually quite transformative, but also for families, they'll be able to access trusted, reliable online information, videos on infant feeding, on crying. You know, if it's the middle of the night and everyone's gone to bed apart from you, and you're up all night with your baby that won't stop crying, you might want to be able to access something that says, you know, you're not going mad, your baby doesn't hate you, this is just a normal process, that sort of talks you down. So actually there's a huge amount in that digital version of the Red Book. We've got great plans for it. And then the final thing I'll mention is this outcomes framework. So we really want, as part of the institutionalization of this, to ensure that the outcomes framework that's looking at early childhood also takes into account outcomes for babies and their families. And with that will come a proper proportionate inspection framework. And so we're talking right now about whether that's a Ofsted inspection or whether it's some other form of inspecting whether the Start for Life really was joined up in your experience, whether it's working for you. And it may mean looking again at the ages and stages questionnaire at age 2 and seeing whether we can somehow collate that data to make that a more useful feedback loop so that you can have continuous improvement of your Start for Life services. So I think that that's where we're up to. It's been a very busy 2 years since we launched the vision, and there is so much more to do, and the goodwill is fantastic. So thank you to everybody who's on this call, and look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you, Tim.
Andrea, thank you very much. There's quite a lot going on to take into account. I've just noticed in the chat, we've got a few questions which we'll selectively come back to. Thank you for those people who've confirmed they can see and hear us. Thank you also for warning us that the whispering behind the camera can be heard. That stopped. And the slides, as usual, will be available through the Parliamentary Foundation website, where we'll post everything from this. Fine. Third speaker. Let's go on to Abby Miranda, who's head of early years and prevention at the Freud Centre, for an update on family hubs. Abby.
Thank you. And
Can you turn the camera around as well?
for supporting me about the work that the government are doing. And I
I hope to be able to provide some of the details of what we do at the National Centre for the Family.
What's going the wrong way?
Okay, I should keep talking.
Sorry, I can't see very well behind the computer. That's
You want to shift around?
okay.
Fine. Yeah.
That's better. Thank you.
Great. So where we're at with the National Centre for Family Hubs, I've tried to situate this within the work that we're doing in the Anna Freud Centre as a whole, where the focus is really on relational practice with attachment and mentalisation as a focus of the work that we do. So the vision at the Anna Freud Centre is to support children and families in terms of building on their strength and to help them achieve their goals in life, which links into one of the earlier slides where we heard about the outcomes that people would like to achieve for their children. And the vision in the early years and prevention department is looking at closing the gap in terms of improving outcomes for children and young people, parents and carers as well. So the approach is really looking at the system around the child as well as the child themselves. And we really focus on relational practice, and the expertise at the centre is around early attachment and keeping the toddler and the child at the centre of all of our work. So I think sometimes we can either focus on the adult's needs or the child's needs, but both of them together I think is really important too. So the National Centre for Family Hubs, as you've heard already, is the idea is that you have the joined up support for children and families and a whole family approach through effective transformation of the local family hub services. And a key approach to all of our work is co-production is embedded in all of the work we do at the National Centre for Family Hubs. And I'll go on to show you who our team are so you can see how we embed that. But this goes in hand with embedding equity, diversity and inclusion, because we're listening to the voices of families that use the service, so we can try and address families who traditionally found it services difficult to access as well. And we try to situate all of our work within the ecological system the family is situated in. So we're not thinking about problems in isolation, we're thinking about the wider factors and how we can help those changes. On the next slide, thank you. So this is just a quick overview of our department and what enables us to do the work. So we work in a multidisciplinary way. So we have clinicians in the team, but we also have other professionals like project managers, researchers, teachers. We're so lucky to have a range of specialisms within the National Centre for Family Hubs. And we work closely with our evidence partners, the Early Intervention Foundation as well, to embed all the learning from the best practice research that's coming out. So we have a regional team and we split the regional team so we can access a rural and urban split, knowing that it's so challenging to try and have a uniform approach given that there's so much variation of need in the country, but the regional team can really help to tackle those issues that are there. We'll go to the next slide. Thanks. So this is where we started off in May 2021, and the funding was announced to our launch in October 2021. And you'll see from the slide in the image in the middle is of our toolkit that is available on our website. And we had our first national conference in November 2021. So part of this disseminating the information to funded and non-funded areas is through our toolkits and our newsletters and our conferences, which are all free of access. So anyone can get the information if they're, depending on what stage they're at in their family hub transformation. And this is how we do it. So our objectives at the National Centre for Family Hubs is to encourage local areas to champion the adoption of family hubs. As we know, this is an approach that works for children and families, so irrespective of funding status, we want some of those principles to be adopted. And the tailored regional support there is there to help with the implementation at a very local level. Developing and disseminating evidence and good practice on family hubs, and helping to create a learning approach where other areas can learn from each other to see what other areas are doing. And this can be really supportive, particularly when there are funding constraints for these local areas, because then they can actually see how other people have done it and to go over particular challenges. One of the challenges that I think lots of local areas are facing is in terms of data protection and data sharing. That's something that comes up quite often for us. This is just a timeline of the national events that and the national and local events that we put on. So we've put on 16 national events since our launch. We've had over 3,000 attendees and high rates of positive feedback. And as you can see, some of the there are specific webinars that have been put on to address particular themes like reducing parental conflict or the best starting life webinar. Family hubs and special educational needs and disabilities, and the priorities for the webinars come up from what we're hearing from local areas in terms of what they need. We tried to integrate some of the research that we have at the Anna Freud Centre, for example, our AMBIT approach, which really is an approach for multi-agency, multidisciplinary teams to encourage that coordinated working together. So some of these webinars, they're all free of access for people. This is an overview of our toolkit modules. It's quite small, but if you go onto the website, you'll be able to see these in more detail. These are topics on there, include some things around governance, some things around process, and then there are other modules that focus more on content and on information sharing. So, for example, we have theory of change, we have why family hubs. So providing all the information that local areas can access depending on what their priorities are for implementation. And the next slide just covers our Family Hubs in Mind newsletter, which goes out every 6 to 8 weeks. And we have 138 of the local authorities in our membership. And we also have a Teams channel, so local authorities can connect with each other and share information there all around family hubs. And this slide just shows we know that the family hubs, it reaches across so many different government departments. So we have a pan-governmental advisory group to bring all these different strands together, and to as well as this, we work with faith sector leaders as part of compact arrangements to ensure that the family hubs provide a safe welcome for all. And part of that is in recognition that the family hubs approach will include our voluntary community sector partners as well. This is some of our work that we've been doing on a regional basis. We have this community of practice events, and they are focused on different themes and topics, and they are open access by invite for people to join, but we're planning on making these available via our website so people can see what's happening and sign up to these on their own. So this is the kind of the areas that we have, and we also have the topical focuses in terms of special educational needs, the areas that are funded, so the Tier 1 areas, rural family hubs and unfunded family hubs as well. And some of the information around our regional approach as well. So we've been meeting with directors of children's services in the Transformation Fund 1 local authority areas to find out what their priorities are, and to pilot the Family Hub development process in collaboration with the Early Intervention Foundation. So there are for the Family Hub development process, the Early Intervention Foundation are supporting the development of family hubs who are in the early stages of their family hub systems maturity. And so far, since the funding announcements have been made, we've met with 8 out of the 14 local areas, and we've got 6 left to meet to find out what their priorities are. This next slide, it shows some information that we've gathered over time from the local areas that have given us insights into their challenges and what they feel are going well as well. So it's really helpful, and to summarise the most pertinent point, I think we've heard about the deadlines that the local areas have in terms of submitting information on the parent carer pet panel and the Start for Life offer. And some of the feedback that we've been receiving is around the deadlines that local areas have and their funding that they have to spend by the end of the financial year. And our role in the National Centre for Family Hubs, we very much see it as enabling local authorities to think about, you've got these deadlines coming up, but what do you want your family hubs to look like on a longer term basis? Because we know that this is a process, it's going to take time, and often getting people together in the room is the biggest and longest step. And it's really positive to hear about the different feedback mechanisms that families will have so they can express what this experience is like for them. But at this very current stage, it really is focused on trying to create that universal front door approach, getting all the information together and mapping out what services are there in local areas. So this is just how we sit alongside the regional delivery leads as well. So we have the Early Intervention Foundation and the National Centre for Family Hubs, and this is how we support the delivery at a national level. That's just a quick overview slide. And if we go on to the next slide, so this just updates on what we have planned next. So we have our Connection conference on the 29th of April. And how we've structured the conference is that we have invited leads from various government departments to come and sit in on the different themes in our conference, so they can feed back what they're hearing from local areas into their colleagues. We're developing a tiered regional offer for government-funded family hubs and consultancy around helping the family hub development process. And we are going to continue to update our toolkit based on what local areas are saying that they need, and increasing the stakeholder engagement as well. So continuing our work with voluntary community-based sector organisations and participation. And that's the last slide. Thank you.
Great, Abby, thank you very much for that. There's an awful lot of information coming up, so we will put all those slides on the website. Right, let's move on to Wook, Hamilton, Head of Development at the Parliamentary Foundation, who are the secretariat to the group. Wook.
Ben, you need to keep your eye on me because I need you to click for various groups.
And you might need to speak up a little bit. I'm just,
I will.
yeah. We're getting
It's being a bit slow. It's coming. It's coming.
It's also not working.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to speak about sort of where we are in the UK in relation to the development of specialist parent-infant relationship teams. So I'm going to give a bit of a picture of what's going on across the UK. I'll describe what we mean by specialist parent-infant team. And I'm going to illustrate it with a kind of snapshot of the case study. So next slide, please, then.
It doesn't like your presentation for some reason. Sorry, bear with us a second, maybe.
You talk
I'm going to just talk without slide because otherwise we'll be, it'll come. Oh,
we're going backwards.
all right, I'm just going to talk, like I wrote slides, so I should totally remember. So in the UK, we're not going to over by us. There are 44 specialist parent-infant teams around the UK. All of those are in our network, and we support them with kind of ongoing learning and development activities. Peer connections. We have a specific. If I have, there'll be a map that will come up soon, and you'll see that there's a cluster in Manchester, and there are actually 9 parent-infant teams in Manchester. The Unitary Authority made a decision to kind of really prioritise the development of specialist parent-infant teams. There's also a couple in Scotland, and we have a development project in Scotland. the Scottish Government has commissioned what they call actually infant mental health teams to have across all the health boards in Scotland. So we have a special development team up there kind of working with the Scottish Government on that development. We're also about to launch a development project in Wales, which is very sort of fertile territory, although there's nothing kind of mandated. Currently there's two specialist parenting teams in Wales, and there's a lot of interest from the ground. So that, oh great, we've got the map up there, fantastic. So amidst that, that is a very varied picture. Certainly commissioning arrangements are quite different. So for some areas they're commissioned by health, some areas they kind of come out of the PANS context, others are local authority commissioned, and some are jointly commissioned. Some are in the charity sector, and there's a few specialist teams who are part of the Lottery Better Start programme to the 10-year, so they've really been kind of quite exemplary. I have to say, although it's delightful to see this, that there's a growth in the specialist parent infant teams, there's also a vulnerability because some of those contracts come to an end. There's no expectation of them going forward, and some sadly have actually closed. So we have been involved in development of some of those teams. We offer, could you click, and you'll find that I've probably covered most of those points. Yes, fantastic. So yeah, we thank you. So we do offer, we have the support is related to developing, and we've also started to reach out to some of the start for life areas, and we've had various meetings with start for life areas, and some of them have brought in our kind of our consultancy model, which we're now getting lead clinicians in some of the more established agencies to act as consultants. So some of those areas who share the vision of having a more specialist team in place, we're offering some intensive development support. And obviously, suffice to say that this is for the parent-infant relationship strand of the start of life model. So I think I've covered most of those points of the house. So next slide, please, Ben. Thank you. Okay, so I think it's worth describing what I mean by a specialist parent infant relationship team. So it's a vision that the Parent Foundation holds. And if you could click, Ben. I'll go through some of the kind of defining features. Maybe pick. Oh well, it's too late. Okay, I'll just go through them. So first of all, the primary aim is to improve the relationship between parents and their babies under 2. And this is a significant point because it really differentiates the teams from perinatal teams whose primary intention is to improve the mental health of the parent. Obviously, there's a huge overlap. So the parent infant team will take a supportive and respectful approach and will work from the family's strength. So it's not like going in and telling what to do, it's about finding what's working and starting there. So a team would take referrals from pregnancy until the child's 2nd birthday. So sometimes people are surprised that you might take referrals from with a mother who's pregnant, a few months pregnant. I've got a case study which will illustrate how effective that can be. They are multidisciplinary and offer tailored packaging support to different levels of need. And what I mean by that is, so typically in a parent infant team, you will have specialist practitioners like psychologists, psychotherapists, parent infant psychotherapists. You also have health visitors, social workers, midwives, early years workers. So it depends on the team, but you will have a range of practitioners, and any parent and infant who comes into the team will have an assessment, and they will get a practice support that's tailored to their need. So that's really critical, because we often think about a kind of an intervention that's evidence-based goes in and kind of, does the deed, as it were. But what's really important about a specialist team is it's nuanced, it really kind of meets the needs of that particular family. As part of that package of support, in addition to a lot of evidence-based groups and approaches, there will be dyadic or triadic work. And what that means is it's work that involves the parent and the infant together. So that would typically and often use video feedback approaches where the dynamic will be closely kind of explored really with the parent. And we also offer parent infant psychotherapy, which will come to will create a balance really of approach between working with the relationship, but also working with what the kind of mental health issues or kind of internal issues of the parent might be that might be getting in the way. So that's what I mean by being tailored to what's kind of presenting. And the final point, the important point, is that part of the work that a parent infant team does is indirect work. So as well as working directly with families, it will work with the wider system, and it might do wider early years system. So it will potentially offer training for health visitors, for any early years practitioner, consultation in different ways. So practitioners will bring up, what should I do about this family? Supervision, talk about the importance of supervision. Reflective practice group. So it's really about changing the culture so that everybody who's involved with the parent and the infant is informed and understands about the importance of the relationship and about mental health, and is able to kind of identify when issues arise. So that also creates, as well as changing culture, it creates a referral pathway into a specialist team. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to illustrate this, I'm going to read through this, so bear with me. This is an extract from a case study. I could have chosen many, but I chose this one, which I really think shows how the trajectory and life chances of an infant and baby can be changed so fundamentally by this kind of intervention. So this is a real scenario. Claire had been in care until she was 13. Since she was 13, apologies, and she had survived many difficult experiences, including sexual abuse. So that's Claire, who became a mother. Her first 3 children were removed from her care because of physical and emotional neglect, and this was linked to her history of drug and alcohol misuse, poor mental health and domestic abuse. So that's what we call the toxic trio. So she then became pregnant for a 4th time. And when she was 3 months pregnant, with her 4th child, and in a relationship, Claire was referred to the parent infant team by both her midwife and her social worker. So this was a situation, as you can see, it was heading for another removal. So Claire, after an assessment, was offered parent infant psychotherapy. What I haven't mentioned here is that she was offered another group as well, but because of her anxiety, she wasn't able to attend a group. So it's important to get the intervention right. So she went into parent infant psychotherapy, and this is the practitioner speaking here. We considered the impact of her experiences on her, and that's both her early childhood experiences and her experiences of losing children, and how they'd impacted on her parenting, and how they could impact on her parenting of her unborn child, Joe. So this was specialist and complex work. We needed to allow Claire the space to grieve for her older children who'd been taken from her, as well as find a way of parenting a new baby. So the outcome of this is baby Joe was born and still with his parents 3 years later. Parent infant therapist's role was as much to support the network around the family, as well as the individual work with both the parents and with baby Joe. And there's a lot that isn't said there, but I think that really is a fantastic example of how powerful this intervention can be, and it can change the life of an infant like Joe. Thank you. So this is just the final slide, really, just to say, although we've got this lovely map of teams around the country, across the UK, an estimate of 100,000 babies will have a significant parent-infant relationship. But there are currently only enough teams to offer interventions for 4,000 babies, so there's a long way to go. And just a caveat to that I think we call values are probably increasing for Brits, but it's still a very similar picture. There's a long way to go thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad the technology works.
Great, yes.
Well, right, two more presentations. Alison from the CEO of the Institute of Health Tourism with the update on the state of health tourism. There's been some rather depressing figures in the media recently as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And it's wonderful to hear so many great stories of some really good work. And I guess my presentation today, this is needed more than ever. So I'm delighted to be invited to share a finding from our survey. And just as a warning, off the end of the slide, that they do come with a bit of health warning. Some of them are quite depressing, but hopefully we'll end on a positive at the end. And just to say hello to everybody joining online, I do take encouragement from knowing there's so many people, like-minded people out there who share this one shared vision to make life better. And actually want to change the strapline to have the best life from the start, not the best starting life. I know it's a slight nuance, but I think it's really important, literally from the moment you need to see, or even before that, we need to be thinking baby. So if you move on to the next slide, please. It works. So there is an old saying there that it takes a village to raise a child, but actually the truth is it takes a lot more than a village. It takes a whole society to raise a child, and that's the message of the Royal Foundation as well, isn't it? It actually takes all of us collectively to do that. And it's not just good for babies, it's actually good for society, because the evidence tells us that when families are supported, babies thrive and the whole of society benefits. So what's it like for families right now? Health visitors will see that reality, what's going on behind the front door. And actually this data that we collected is really a precious gift, I would say, to policymakers, because it lands in the eyes of health visitors long before it lands on the desk of a government minister in a nice report. Because they are in a privileged position, they see thousands and thousands of families every week across the country, and parents tell them about the struggles that are happening, often hidden behind front doors and not recognised or not invisible to many services. And this matters actually because babies are our most vulnerable citizens. I won't bore you with the evidence, but there's bucket loads of it, from child death inquiries, serious incidents, the embryo report. This is a big problem for babies. So move on to the next slide. So just to set the scene, actually, before I go into the findings from our survey, actually, we need to remember that actually we have a poor state of child health and widening inequalities long before the pandemic, saw across a data intervention and a recognised problem with invisible vulnerable children. So we have 2.3 million vulnerable children in this country, and a third are not going to services and not getting the support that they need, and that matters. So our survey was more than 1,300 practitioners working in every postcode across the country. And what they told us was that poverty was the biggest issue affecting families, 91%. So that's pretty much every health visitor working in every postcode will be working with families that are affected by poverty in the last 12 months that's gone up. And we know that poverty affects every aspect of family life. It's damaging for parents and it's damaging for babies. And health visitors seeing those impacts every day. If we move on to the next slide, this is not hypothetical. So the government's own data shows that there's a significant and growing minority of babies born in the pandemic who have fallen behind with their development, and children from the poorest backgrounds are affected the most. And this slide shows some of the data from our survey. But I also wanted to refer to the fabulous report produced by Sally Hogg and Georgina Mays from the IHG, which collated the most recent evidence from research as well as national data. And what it really shows is the impact on children's health, their safety and their development. In terms of child safeguarding, what health visitors reported was that, well, 60% of there had been further increases in child safeguarding over the last 12 months, and that built on increases that they reported during the pandemic and the previous year. If we move on to the next slide, this is interesting. Because actually, what the national data tells us is that the number of children on a child protection plan has only gone up by 1.8%. So should we be worried or should we be reassured? Actually, health visitors tell us two things, that we should be very worried, because actually for two reasons. Child safeguarding cases, particularly for babies and young children, are masked because health visitors have less contact with families, so they're less likely to detect children who are in distress. And I want to just cast your eye onto that graph on the right-hand side. So this is a graph of referrals to children's social care over time. It's tiny, but the dips that you can see correlate to school holidays. So what that tells us is that the adult outside of the home play a significant role in the identification of vulnerable children in school. So that's the teachers, the school nurses. So then that begs the question, who is doing that for babies? Who is collecting and joining the pieces of the jigsaw? The direct quote from the Children's Safeguarding Review Panel that we need to collect the pieces of the jigsaw to build a picture of the baby's world. Who is doing that for babies and young children? And then the second reason is that what health is sort of saying is that when they do identify a need and they go through MASH or whatever the local process is, that actually children that would previously have been on the caseload of a social worker now don't hit the threshold because there's a finite number of children that could be on a social worker's caseload. And so they would be categorised or encouraged to be categorised as children in need or early help or nothing at all actually for some of these families. So some families are not getting any help or hardly any help at all when they have significant vulnerabilities. We move on to the next slide. In terms of how services are responding, two things to focus on. Firstly, services were telling us that they have reduced capacity to identify needs. So the national picture on the left-hand side, 1 in 5 children are missing out on vital health reviews, and that increases to 1 in 4 for the 2-year review. So just as a warning, this is England data, so the national picture marks a massive postcode lottery. So on the right-hand side of that slide, you will see the drill down into the local authority data with the lowest and the highest performing local authorities. You can see a huge variation. So what that means in real money, as it were, is that when we have 600,000 births, approximately slightly above every year, across 5 mandated contacts, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of children are missing out on these vital health reviews. And ask the question, does that matter? Well, of course, some of those children will be absolutely fine, but we know within that group there will be children with clinical vulnerabilities, so missed chronic health conditions and disabilities that aren't being detected early when treatment makes a big difference, but also children with safeguarding vulnerabilities who will get missed. And these children who were born in the pandemic are going to be 3 this year and they will hit school next year. So now is the time to act. Really, there is a huge sense of urgency on this. So if we move to the next slide, services are also reporting that when they identify a need, they're having difficulties meeting the scale of rising needs. So large volumes of children, a backlog, plus increasing needs that need to be addressed if we're serious about early intervention. Only 7% of health visitors felt confident that all or most families would be able to get the support they needed when a problem was identified. This is a problem identified by a health visitor. And many rated their services as very stretched, requiring improvement or inadequate. And this has an impact on families as well as services across the whole integrated health, this is the health service, as well as the care system and the early services we were talking about earlier. The biggest reasons were not enough health visitors, not enough capacity in onward referral services, so across the system, speech and language therapy, pediatrician, all stretched as well. Health visitors are picking up a lot of safeguarding work now, going back to my previous comment on thresholds. So what that meant was that it was impacting their time available for prevention and early intervention. And actually many were telling us that services were becoming inaccessible for some families, that the gateway had shut, had closed, had become narrow. It was harder to reach your health visitor, clinics had been closed down, there were fewer health visitors available and less time to spend with families. At a time when we know we need to be opening that gateway and making it easy for families to access support. And moving on to the next slide, just to hark back to the evidence, we know that investment in the first 1,001 days makes sound economic sense, but at exactly the same time as cost of child protection and later intervention are soaring. This is a quote from Tim Loughton. We're wasting a lot of money getting it wrong, 23 billion pounds a year. At exactly the same time, health visiting numbers are falling, so we've seen a 40% reduction in the health visiting workforce, with huge caseloads for health visitors. And this is despite the evidence that was published at the end of Call to Action, which is the height of that curve, with the benefit realisation report published by the government, which showed that there was a huge difference that the health visitors could make was each children and families' outcome. So moving on to solutions, I'm aware of time. Next slide, please. Prevention is better than cure. It's better, cheaper, and kinder than cure, actually. And this slide shows a huge range of current opportunities for health visitors to contribute to across government priorities. We need to think systems, because a strengthened health visiting service not only benefits early years, but it also benefits health, and social care, and then knocked into education and many other government departments. I just want to focus on one of these on this slide. So the example, current priority to reduce urgent care attendances across the board. We know that babies and young children are very high users of A&E. Over the winter, NHS England reported that at one point children's A&E attendance had gone up by 60%. And when they drill down into the information, that didn't knock into increased hospital attendances. So babies and young children were attending A&E for relatively mild illnesses that would previously have been met elsewhere. So I'm not a great fan of unwanted or unwarranted attendance. I don't think that we can argue that case, because actually what these visits tell us is two very important things. They tell us that parents are worried, and it's perfectly normal to worry when you're really sick. You think they're going to die, and you want somebody to tell you that actually this is relatively minor and it's okay, babies get sick, but you need somebody there when you're worried. The second thing they tell us is that parents can't get that help that they need elsewhere. And there is some evidence of piece of work that I was involved in myself across Wessex. We work with paediatricians in the hospital, and we produced safety netting advice that help visitors deliver. What they showed was over time, as the rate of A&E attendance was going up, with this safety netting advice and support from health visitors, the attendance didn't go up, and parents' health literacy improved and their confidence, and they were less likely to repeat to be attending A&E. So it benefits across the system. So the next slide, I'm coming to a close. So UNICEF UK has described health visiting as the backbone of the early years, a safety net for all families. And actually, I think as we seek to rebuild our services and think systems and think babies, just to be reminded of the purpose of the Healthy Child Programme, it's not just about interventions. It's about preventing problems happening in the first place. It's about spotting children who are at the highest risk of poor outcomes, doing something about it. It's about engaging families, the parents who need support the most are the least likely to step forward and ask for it. So these are services that go out and get some of the side hands and support them, and provide a safety net for those families who are the most likely to drop out. So a few priorities just to end on. To achieve this, we need, number one, to prioritise the first 1,001 days. We need to see this as the smartest of all investments in our nation's future. Secondly, to commit to the long term. So we talked about goals and outcomes. Really, we need to invest in long-term goals. So just go back a slide. The goals for family-led partnership weren't seen for 7 years. I wrote the taxpayer death value review on that. The shorter outcomes for A&E attendance and hospital admissions were shown after 11 years. We need to commit to end the postcode lottery and quality service for all children. The big ticket, this is really important, the big ticket public health priorities don't vary between local authorities. This is too important to be left to chance. And we need to invest in our workforce, because actually it's only through our people that we deliver high quality services. So that's the end from me. If you want to know more about health visiting, the next slide shows our fabulous little film that we made, or do contact me. I'm happy to talk to you at length.
Great, Alison, thank you very much. And that's a perfect segue into our final, last but not least, contribution from UNICEF, and Claire Amara, who's the head of UK policy at UNICEF, to talk about the baby and toddler guarantee.
Thank you, and yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm sure quite a lot of people who are joining the school and in the room are maybe more familiar with UNICEF UK talking about their baby friendly initiative. I'm here from our advocacy department and talking more about a campaign that we launched towards the end of last year, which I hopefully you will all be aware of, called Early Moments Matter. So, next slide, please. So I'm very aware that anyone who's attending this doesn't need convincing the importance of early years. So I'm not going to spend my time doing that, but I'm going to tell you a bit about what the campaign's about, a little bit about what our launch report covers, and most importantly, what the baby toddler guarantee is, and then whet your appetite with some of the things that are coming up in the next few months. The Early Moments Matter campaign, as I said, was launched towards the end of last year. The campaign itself was developed by the team in-house, but we conducted lots of focus groups with parents in the north and south of England across income groups. We conducted a poll of 3,500 parents with children under 5 years. And a really key part of this, which I know many people in this room were involved in, and also online, we spoke to a lot of organisations across the sector who've been working in this area for a really long time.
because it was really important that as UNICEF UK coming in, we had this global experience in early childhood, but what we really wanted to do was be part of the sector, coming in behind the calls, the really detailed analysis and evidence that already exists, and be there as a sort of an extra voice, and use that platform that we have to kind of support. And it's been really nice listening to these presentations today, thinking, yes, we're supporting that. Yes, we're supporting that. And so hopefully that will become clear through the presentation. So when we launched the campaign, we had a big fancy report, as we like to do, again, drawing on the evidence that is out there. We did some additional analysis, which I will talk about in a minute. We launched a petition, which is now up to, I think it's nearly 38,000 signatures. We also did a voice note action, which was really interesting. We haven't done this before. And this gave us a chance to hear from people who signed the petition, who wanted to share their own experiences. These voice notes are incredible. We've had about 200 of them. They're still coming in, and they just give you a sense of some of the things that parents are thinking about and worrying about. Now, what I'm hoping, oh, sorry, Ben, could you move on the side? I wasn't paying attention. What I'm hoping is if you press it a second time, they might hear one of them.
Struggled to access speech therapy. It took 2 years from referral to get our first session, and it's still a fight to keep the sessions going now. These are services we've been professionally referred to, and they're essential for our children's development, yet they are woefully under-resourced.
Press again.
My 2 children split across 3 nursery settings because I couldn't even find one in my local area that could take 2 children for 4 days a week. There's just not enough places because everywhere's shutting because they're underfunded as well. It's a mess, and it shouldn't be this hard to go to work. It feels like a battle to go to work.
So yes, you get a sense of some of the messages that we've been hearing from parents since we started this campaign. I don't know if everyone online was able to hear that, but if not, when you get the presentation, you'll be able to click through them. And again, what we wanted to do from the start of this campaign is make sure that parents' voices are as central to this as possible. So moving on to the next slide. When we conducted our focus groups and our polling, these were some of the key things that came out from those discussions. The first one was about really strong awareness for parents that there are differences in access and experience. They know, even in those discussions, learning about what services they might have had available to them had they known, and that was quite interesting watching that happening. But also understanding between their friends or their family, or maybe they've moved location between children, or even just between the ages of their children, really aware that the services aren't the same for every child. We heard about parents feeling unsure about who to turn to for support, and that fight to get support. We just heard from that mum before, trying to access the speech and therapy support that they need. And then obviously this was conducted last year. There was a lot of media around the cost of living increases, and we heard that coming in through loud and clear. I think if we repeated that now, we'd be hearing, or we'd still be hearing worries, but we'd also be hearing many more stories of the steps people were taking there to manage that. But we already were hearing, even before these prices were going up, that families were cutting spending on things like books, activities, crafting materials, things that sound like luxuries, but we all know in this space are absolutely crucial for a really positive home learning environment. So that was a key piece. The childcare piece, I think we've heard a lot about recently, and also this sort of ongoing frustration that the pandemic impacts were still being felt. It hadn't gone away. They still weren't able to access things as they had before. So if you move on to the next slide. So in terms of the additional analysis we did, what we wanted to do is get a bit of a snapshot of what that situation was across the country in terms of accessing the really core services, and the ones that Andrea was laying out before, the ones that everybody should be able to access. Easier said than done. In the end, we managed to sort of give a snapshot of four areas, which covered maternity, health visiting, mental health, and early childhood education and care. So it's not the full suite, and even within those, it's still just sort of a tiny window. We then looked at that across the country, the sort of averages regionally. We found huge differences where you went in the country. In some places, We were seeing that huge numbers of early years education settings were closed, in other areas it was better. Some areas that had reasonably high levels of health visiting appointments being met, and as we've already heard from Alison, other areas where there were huge gaps. So I think that the overall picture, and it is definitely worth looking at the report to see all the detail, but it's very hard to see those trends. It was really hard to be able to look at it and say that's where we need to put the focus. What we saw is that decisions are being obviously made at a local level, which is the right thing, but we weren't able, there wasn't obviously something that was driving everybody towards raising standards across the board. So if we move on to the next slide, our report also highlighted 4 big policy challenges. These are the wicked problems that we know need to be addressed if we're actually going to ensure that every child in this country does access those core services. I won't go into great detail now because I think probably most of us are quite familiar with them. The workforce piece is so key, and it is obviously health visitors, but it's across all of these early years professions. So we've got big gaps in health visiting, huge challenges around midwifery, and also within the early education and childcare space as well. So that's really, really hard to be able to unpack. Funding overall, there's a bigger pot of money for early years than there may have been in the past, but almost all of that goes into that 33 hours, and then all these other supporting services for early years we have seen a big decrease. It's great that we've had funding through the family hubs, but we know that that's only supporting a small number of those services, and things like health visiting, some of those really core ones aren't getting additional funding. So we're really concerned that actually those 6 core services aren't going to be being fully delivered in all of the areas of the family hub work. On to the next slide. And then the last 2 big policy challenges, so governance and accountability. This has already been highlighted in a couple of different presentations. This challenge of the issue being so spread across different parts of government, which kind of makes it everyone's problem and no one's problem. Who do you take it to when things aren't being delivered? Who is ultimately accountable for this? The outcomes piece that Andrea was talking as well. We really need to know what good looks like for young children's development, and we need to make sure that we see that babies and young children are actually visible in our policy across the board, and not just in this sort of one small area. And none of this is possible without better data. First of all, tracking outcomes of children, but second, about the delivery. As I said, it was nigh on impossible to get a really accurate picture of what actually exists. So we are, moving on to the next one, we're calling for a baby and toddler guarantee, and I think this is just another way of saying please institutionalise early years support, and it's saying that all babies, toddlers and young children should have guaranteed access to a set of core services and support in early childhood that promotes and protects their development from pregnancy through to age 4, no matter where they live in the country. So we see there's a number of things that need to be undertaken in order to make that possible. I'm not going to go through that now because I am aware of time, so I will just leave you with a couple of things that we were going to be doing next. So we've got 2 really interesting research projects that will be coming out in the next few months. One that we've been developing in collaboration with PEDAL at the University of Cambridge, which is an early childhood mental health toolkit. So this is responding to what we've been hearing from practitioners, that there are differences of understanding about infant mental health and what the terminology means, and how you actually then take that and apply it to commissioning services. So it's a really practical piece of work that we've been doing in conjunction with local authorities and experts, some of which I think are in the room. And then the second piece, which I'm really excited about, is we're going to be, we're in the middle of conducting a piece of research with Refugee Education UK, trying to understand better what the experiences and access of refugee and asylum seeking children is to early education and childcare. There's almost nothing out there about it, so I think this is going to be very insightful. And you will see and hear from us lots over the next few months as we continue to push our campaign
Hopefully lots of stuff in June, and it's parenting month, maybe infant mental health week as well. Yes, good. And soccer aid for anyone who knows UNICEF UK. That's our big event in June, and they're hoping they are going to be supporting the campaign as well. I will leave it there.
Claire, thank you very much. Now I'm aware, partly about technology, but actually we had so much to cover. There is very little time left for questions. We'll pick up just a few points. One thing I want to mention, first, because where this is leading, and where I think our next meeting will be in the summer term, is we need to start thinking about manifestos and the election. So we are coming up to a good time to be able to influence parties 18 months out perhaps from an election as they start to write manifestos, and we have key party conferences in the autumn. So just as Andrea pioneered the first 1000 days manifesto back in 2012, 2013 originally, which fed through into putting pressure on all the parties to really take this seriously. Clearly, there's an awful lot of asks still there. We want the government to go further on the programme which they've funded so far. We want to make sure that all the other parties continue to support that on a cross-party basis. And we want to make sure if there's a change of government that we've got continuity about seeing this as a priority and making sure people are focusing much more on those first 1001 days. So at the next meeting, one of the things will be to start to pull together some asks that we want to then put into a manifesto, to write to all parties and to challenge them to saying this is what we believe, with the backing of all the very widespread membership that we have from the world of academia, from the Royal Colleges, from the children's organisations, youth organisations, and others that really can have some clout. Now we have so little time. I just want to pick up. There was a very first early question, which was for the Royal Foundation from Chris Stein. I think if we get that one, I'm just going to pick up a few questions with tomorrow's help. So questions for the Royal Foundation, which you've just taken off and go down a bit. When respondents talk about mental health, are they referring to diagnosed mental health presentations or a sense of well-being and happiness? And depending on what you feel they're responding to, how do you interpret the data? We could take all afternoon to refer to that. A couple more do you want to pick up tomorrow, and then I'll just ask the comments.
Yeah, I actually thought it was quite interesting. The second comment, actually, the second question about the warm and comforting vibes felt by Layla in the video. The questioner asked whether government policies seem to be geared towards getting mothers back into work at 9 months when separation anxiety starts to appear. What can be done to support families to have the choice to be able to care longer for their babies?
Okay, I think because we are going to have to finish at 3, because I know there's going to be another meeting in here. So do you want to take, first of all, just in response to the first question?
So just really quickly, I think we know from the evidence that when thinking about mental health, the public do tend to think about more generalised well-being in relation to mental health over and above diagnosed conditions. But we did ask about mental health and long-term happiness separately, and both of those things came consistently across the audience with areas that really appeal to people to invest in. And we did do some cognitive testing in our survey work around some of the more detailed work we did around emotional literacy. That's a big conversation, not 3 minutes.
There's some points there about the video. What I think we might have to do is perhaps we could distribute where there are specific questions to some of our speakers, and if they are able to come up, we might put some comments on the website in response to that. Otherwise, we're just not doing it justice. Does anybody else want to make any final comment or response?
Just like to acknowledge the problem really in terms of the language around mental health, and so I understand where that question is coming from, and I think it's important to recognise that of course infants will not get a mental health diagnosis, but their mental welfare, emotional well-being is what we're concerned about. But it is very serious, and what we do know is that there will be a greater risk of developing mental health issues further down the line. So.
Okay, I think I'm going to finish it there because I know we're not getting doing justice. Thank you very much, everyone. We've had well over 100 people here for most of the meeting. Thank you, particularly Ben, for making the technology work just about eventually, but we got everything we needed to cover. Sorry, we haven't been able to pick up your questions. We'll distribute them to the speakers, and if there are specific queries to come back on, we'll ask them to respond through the website. The slides will be available on the Relation website, and you've got all the contact details of people here as well if you want to follow through with more questions and clarifications. And on that basis, at 1 minute to 3, thank you very much, everybody. We'll distribute the date for the next meeting in the summer, and as I say, please concentrate on the manifesto asks that we can put together from this group for all of the parties. Thank you very much.